Hello, I'm Edith Hall, and the goal of this short film is to explain Durham University's initiative to teach classical moral philosophy in British prisons. Now, out of the current population of prisoners in Britain and Northern Ireland across the four nations, there are about 100,000 people in prison, of whom about 4,000 are women. Now, only 0.1%, that's less than 100, are never going to get out. So what's needed is help and support to allow prisoners to develop life skills and personal skills and qualities that will enable them to flourish when they get out. Many of them have the opportunities to learn skills that they can sell, so they can make a living, like bricklaying or hairdressing. But what's needed is something that will help them flourish in a more personal and individual sense. Support with knowing how to make decisions, how to identify their potential, how to choose good partners and loved ones, and how to speak persuasively and effectively to get what they want and stand up for themselves with words. So this is where the ancient Greek secular moral philosophers come in. Almost all the ancient moral philosophers started with the question, what is human happiness? And then, what is social flourishing together in a community? And amongst those, there are 8 particular figures, which we introduced the prisoners to very early on in the course, and then explain through discussion with them why we're focusing in particular on Aristotle. Now, he wrote the very first book, the Nicomachean Ethics, which is devoted to the individual's self-help, how to develop yourself into the best possible version of you, how to identify what you're on the planet for, and then how to make a real success of it. And that can be given a second chance, it can be given a third chance, it can start, as Aristotle himself did, only to really get fulfilled at the age of 49. The underlying concept of Aristotle's philosophy is that everything on the earth, whether it's a little acorn or a little baby, is going to develop and has a potential, and if it achieves that full potential, so the little acorn becomes the greatest, most beautiful oak tree, it's achieved its telos. This is teleology. So this is the fundamental principle that these prisoners can learn to become the most advanced and best version of themselves with a little bit of help and support and self-reflection. And that maps very closely onto the Ministry of Justice's principle that's actually enshrined in their documentation, that education in prisons should help prisoners find a purpose in life, their potential, and then how to fulfill it. The other really important plank in the programme is teaching of what the ancient Greeks called rhetoric. That's just the art of persuasion, persuasive speech. And several of them have said they find this session particularly helpful even while they're still in prison, because it helps to de-escalate conflict on the wing. Now, the project began about 4 years ago. I was asked to speak at an event in Manchester, which was about how learning to speak cogently, that doesn't mean learning to speak posh, it means learning to speak cogently and affect your audience and get the result that you want, is something that really should be taught to everybody at primary school. It really is crucial that people know how to stand up to themselves and articulate their needs. And that is very, very important. And Aristotle wrote the first surviving book on that, his Rhetoric, and it's still used by speechwriters today. So I was talking about this in Manchester, and some of my co-speakers were either prisoners or ex-prisoners. It was actually more focused on class, how many people from impoverished backgrounds never get any training in communication. And Sarah Hartley happened to be there. She is the very important link in all of this. She's chair of the National Criminal Justice Arts Alliance and national lead for creative arts and enrichment at Novus, which is an education charity delivering philosophy and all sorts of other interesting life-enhancing initiatives in prisons. She later contacted me and said she'd been very interested in the ancient Greek concept. Would I like to develop a course for delivery in prisons, the hope of getting it out to even the most impoverished and oppressed and marginalised people in our country, I said yes with huge enthusiasm, talked to colleagues, including specially Professor Arlene Holmes-Henderson, my colleague at Durham Prison, with whom I've long run a project called ACE, which is Advocating Classics Education, which aims to get classical subjects out to every state school in the land at secondary level. We thought that this would be a marvellous second level initiative for our project. And we began with a very small grant from Durham University of about £10,000, which paid all our expenses for the first 2 years of our project. But we've run out, and there is no more coming from that source. During that time, we brought Aristotle's ideas into five prisons across the northeast and in Wales and in Yorkshire, including a women's prison and a remand prison in our hometown of Durham. But our money is gone, and we now need support to continue what we think is incredibly important work over the next 2 years. We work entirely for free on top of our full-time university teaching and research positions. But we need to be able to stay near prisons when they're not near where we live. So, for example, we were in Bridgend, South Wales a couple of weeks ago. We stay at the cheapest travel lodges, and we also need the cheapest economy train fares. Otherwise, we would be funding all of that out of our own pocket, as well as giving our time. So we need help, and that is where you can come in to expand the availability of Aristotle's transformative ideas, which is largely based on my public-facing book, Aristotle's Way, How Ancient Wisdom Can Change Your Life, which I donate free. I donate all the copies free. We're also training prison educators to maximise impact in the number of prisons that this can reach. And we taught 11 prison educators from different prisons in January and are about to train 12 more in September. If you give, say, £50 now, you cover a night for one of us, a travel lodge. £10 will buy our sandwiches for a day. £5 prints out teaching materials for a day. You make a real difference even with very small sums. And you'll be helping massively to change the chances of happiness and self-fulfilment for some of the most unfortunate people amongst our fellow citizens. What do? We offer an introduction to ancient ethics. We take prisoners either over a week or on 8 weekly visits through ideas and skills that can transform their lives. So first, we think about their own personalities and which virtues they can emphasise and which problematic aspects they can work on. And Aristotle actually provided a questionnaire in another book called his Eudemian Ethics to help with this. Some find that they really need to work on anger, some on self-respect, some on empathy, others on self-control. So they get a plan to figure out what they're good at and can work on. So they may be very kind, they may be very supportive, they may be great leaders, they may be great communicators, but then where they've got into trouble through excess or deficiency in something, whether that's not standing up for themselves too quickly, or being overly addicted to physical pleasures. And using ancient theories about public speaking, Arlene leads a session on how you need to understand the emotional situation of your audience, what their drivers and hooks are, what they actually want to get out of you, and present yourself authentically, as well as about the content of your speech. And that is Aristotle's famous triangle, that it's not just the speech and the words, it's your self-presentation and the emotional temperature, reading the room. In friendship, we use Aristotle's fourfold division of philia, which means love. But for him, that extended from a very intense engagement with a select number of loved ones who may be family or chosen friends or partners. Then there are friends which you make in the course of, say, your working life, people you work with every day, other mums in the school playground, travellers you meet on holiday, fellow prisoners that you're with in prison. Then there are pleasure friends. Now, they're people that you like to do things with, a friend who you always go and play tennis with or always go to the pub with for a laugh. And then there are fellow citizens. And the emphasis on that is on how important are things like reciprocity, mutual trust, and spotting the people contact with whom causes you damage, and being able to curtail those relationships in a civil and final way. In decisions, Aristotle has a wonderful, practical 10-point plan for making the best decision. Most important are emphasising that take your time, always try to buy time for proper deliberation, and getting all the information. So many decisions are based on haste and ignorance. And the prisoners also perform a Greek tragedy with props. There's a play by Sophocles which has an all-male cast, and we do that in men's prisons, and we use Sophocles' Antigone, which has two very young women standing up for what they believe is right and we bring in props and hats and some silly accoutrements which the prisoners really adore. And after they perform it, and they tend to be very enthusiastic about being picked for a role, and there's a chorus for everybody who isn't, then we talk about the emotions it's brought up, whether that is rage, revenge, hatred, passionate love, or the need to decide where and when it is appropriate to break the law. The feedback we've received has been quite extraordinary. We may make another film about how prisoners say that it has changed their lives, and universally positive. It also won the Outstanding Achievement Award against hundreds of other courses for Excellence in Prison Education 2026. Now, to kickstart the funding so that we can go on for the next few years, I recently gave £4,000 of my own money. I'd won a thing called the International Hellenic Prize for a book actually about survivment, a sort of memoir about surviving bereavement by suicide. But I won this money and I put £4,000 in to kickstart our goal, which is to get 20,000. That should enable us to go into several more prisons for 5 more years. And Arlene has also contributed some money after winning the Classical Association Prize 2026. But we've still got quite a way to go. We've got about a third of the 20,000. We've got just over 7,000. We need to sustain our work over the next 3 years. Please help if you possibly can. I'd like to finish with the certificate that we give to all our prisoners when they finish, that they have done a Durham University course on classical philosophy and stuck the course out, and they can get that certificate to stick on their prison wall. Thank you very much.